and let us all do we can to build a better future.
Happened today. I woke up. Our good friend Roger Meadows had, got on Twitter and had tagged me in a post with Sabby Sabs and some other folks, and I was talking about the issue of evictions. We'd been saying, I guess Sabby and myself, as you know, have been saying for a long time, kicking the can on down the road with the evictions was not going to solve any problems. It was just going to start creating even more issues. And we just had an incident here in Chicago. I'm not going to go into depth because it's very graphic, but there was a very upsetting case a few blocks from where I live, in which a landlady who was operating effectively a boarding house in her home. Everybody had their own units with deadbolt locks on them, but she was operating a boarding house. A very disturbed tenant. She was trying to evict that tenant, and that tenant, it appears at this point, according to law enforcement, it appears as though that tenant did murder the landlady. This has caused extreme distress in Chicago, in our community. By all accounts, the landlady was a lovely person who, had this boarding house in her home that was, for many people, can provide that kind of housing, can really be very positive for a lot of people who have limited income or may have a hard time qualifying for rental housing. Apparently, there was a tenant in there that was causing problems. The other tenants were afraid of this tenant. And again, you can find the story online. I'm not going to link to it because it's that upsetting. But it did happen. But this is exactly the kind of thing that I've been talking about for a while. A few weeks ago, I reported on the fact that eviction-related violence there's been more of those incidents being reported throughout the country, where people who are distressed, who have already had a lot of challenges after the global health crisis or during the global health crisis, and who are desperate, are now finding themselves on the hook for, in some cases, thousands of dollars in rent, are looking at being evicted. You've also potentially got landlords who, because of eviction moratoriums, are now in desperate straits and are losing their homes to foreclosure. It's a real issue at this point. So I wanted to bring up some stories from around the country about how some of these areas are dealing with what's happening. If there's one state where I don't expect there to be a whole lot of concern about evictions, it's Nevada, specifically Las Vegas, which, if you can imagine, trying to deal with evictions there and tenants there would be a difficult challenge, particularly when you have a state that does, that makes its money on gambling, but doesn't really do much to treat gambling problems. So the Las Vegas Justice Court is now actually putting in programs into place that can help prevent people from getting evicted. So, or that can minimize also the possibility for landlords of losing their homes to foreclosure because they have a tenant who is refusing to pay rent. So it looks like they're trying to address both sides of the equation here. And for those of you folks who are hostile against landlords, again, I believe housing is a right. I would like to see more housing co-ops and other ways of handling housing without relying on rentals. But keep in mind, the majority of landlords out there only own a few units. They are not getting rich off of hundreds of units all over an area. And that when the independent landlord loses a home to foreclosure, or because they're not getting the kind of support they need to have tenants pay rent, what happens is then that's when you get hedge funds and large corporations that come in and scoop up all that housing, and the ownership of that housing gets consolidated. And so that's something that we need to keep in mind. So what's going right now is the Las Vegas Justice Court has been given a grant of $1.25 million, and they're creating an eviction diversion program. And that would be something like, say, a drug diversion program or a bounced check diversion program, which is designed to keep people out of the more punitive aspects of the system and instead find ways to mediate the issues that are going on. So what they're trying to do is, yeah, they're trying to work through their caseload, which is really high. But what they're also trying to do is they're trying to get landlords and tenants to talk to each other, to work together, to have a solution to what's
Mhm.
going on that does not involve having an actual eviction.
Well, again, the option should not be eviction at all. Again, we can't forget in 2021 when Corey Bush and AOC did their infamous live stream where they had to quickly run to stop Nancy from adjourning Congress. And the thing is, after everything was said and done and their little show trying to protest in front of Capitol Hill, they were enjoying a fake victory, to which again, shout out to Frank Analysis, who called them out on this.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing was changed, and we're still seeing this ongoing problem. Millions of Americans are still at risk of being evicted from their homes and apartments. And there is such a lack of concern and compassion from our politicians, which goes to the point I've always said, these politicians don't think about you, they don't like you, they don't respect you. The option should never be for eviction, because what if this person has lost everything? You don't know somebody's mental state. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, right now, there's a lot of people out there who are afraid, concerned, and a lot of people are becoming powder kegs that are ready to explode.
Yep.
One bad day, and somebody might just say, F it, I have nothing left to lose.
Yeah. And that is an absolute, that is a concern. It's already happened.
Mm-hmm.
Where you have both individuals and and landlords, and in some cases law enforcement, who have been shot or killed or attacked. And in this case, there was apparently, in the case in Chicago, the neighbors themselves were very frightened. The situation was it was a very bad situation. And I don't know what's going to happen, for example, in this boarding house in Chicago. Landlady's dead. I don't know if they're going to be able to keep their housing. And where are they going to go if the landlady's heirs decide, and wouldn't blame them, decide that they're going to shut down the boarding house and try to move on. I don't know what's going to happen to these people. And this is just a nightmare. This has been so poorly managed here in the US during the global health crisis. And I am glad to see that the Las Vegas courts are putting some money into this. I want to say there's some courts up in Wisconsin that have a mediation program where they try to bring people together and to talk and to work out a deal so that the eviction doesn't have to happen, doesn't have to be on somebody's record, where there's no, the liability is minimized. Sometimes it's just education, working past issues. But this is an example of what could be happening.
Now, I want to just push up something or mention something here. John Kemper, good friend of the show, wrote this. I fought with code enforcement and landlords so many times I quit. Chicago living is criminal. John, you hit the nail on the head so hard, man. There are endless stories about the standards of living here in this city and the eviction crisis that's happening. I mean, I'm seeing tent cities rise up. I'm seeing people being evicted. And again, Lainey, I know we have another article to go with this story, but real quick, can you inform our viewers what their rights are if they're at risk of being evicted from an apartment, for example?
Keep in mind, all right, that landlord-tenant laws vary by state, and in many cases will vary by municipality. So, for example, Illinois has its own landlord-tenant law, and then there are some cities in Illinois, such as Chicago, that have additional ordinances. And typically, the way that works is whatever protections a tenant has from the state, a local ordinance could actually increase that protection. Another thing to keep in mind is that not all contracts are valid. There was recently some reporting, and again, it was in Nevada, where there were landlords who were putting into their contracts, their lease agreements, that the tenants were obligated to have sex with the landlord on a regular basis, and that by moving in to the unit, that tenant, and in some cases the tenant's children, were consenting to sexual activity.
Oh God!
Now, this is and sometimes people don't understand that you can't enforce something like that. So there are a whole lot of state laws, for example, that basically say a tenant cannot waive the right to an eviction hearing. Almost, as far as I know, every state requires a landlord to go through a process to remove a tenant from the property. There has to be legal notice, and this is not an eviction notice. A lot of people, they get this notice from their landlord, and it'll say something like cure or quit, means either pay the rent or get rid of your pet or clean up your mess, or you have 5 or 10 days to move out. That is not telling you have to move out now. The landlord can't come and just put you out.
Yeah.
You have time. And you have some time. You have to read that notice carefully, but you need to talk to ideally an attorney, a legal aid attorney, try to work things out with the landlord. And if that doesn't get worked out, then the landlord does have to take you to court. Now, again, this process will vary a bit by jurisdiction. So you've got to look at your own jurisdiction. And it's not the jurisdiction that your sister-in-law in a different state had to go through, or that process, because the jurisdiction is different, and it's not even the same, even across town, if you're in different cities. So you want to be careful with that. But they have to give you your day in court. The landlord's going to have to take you to court. You should be given a notice of that. You can go to court. You can explain your position. In many cases, if you do show up with an attorney, because oftentimes they're counting on you not showing up with an attorney, if you have an attorney, you can oftentimes arrange to stay. Even if eventually you're going to be forced out, they can sometimes arrange for you. You can be allowed to stay if that attorney can work the system. And then even if the court orders an eviction, your landlord in most cases is going to have to either get a sheriff's deputy or a special constable to enforce the eviction. So you'll get another notice saying from the sheriff's department or a special constable, okay, we're coming on this date to evict you. And at that point, yeah, you do have to get out. But there's a lot of stuff that has to happen before you can be forced out. So I would say everybody has an obligation to understand landlord-tenant rights, where they are, if not for yourself, for somebody else. Because when people get that notice or they get a threat of an eviction, they panic. Mm-hmm. And people need to understand that usually you will have some time.
Right on. All right. Thank you so much for that, Lainey. People need to know what their rights are.
Absolutely. So just kind of moving on. Now, this is a nutty story from Human Rights Watch. And this is in New Mexico. There is a crisis of evictions going on in public housing. And typically in public housing, I mean, qualifying for public housing in and of itself is very difficult. Typically, you're paying 30% of your income for the rent. You have to qualify on the basis of disability or income or your family situation. And apparently, there's just been an increase in eviction notices coming out. You have people who are confused. They don't know what to, they don't know what to do. In some cases, the evictions have not proceeded legally. It's a real issue, and these are probably the most vulnerable people on the planet. And they pointed out, for example, the average tenant's income in this area that they're talking about here is not even $16,000 a year.
Wow, my God.
Yeah. And so, I mean, again, this is happening. It's on the increase. In one case, for example, one person actually had the eviction was reversed by the court, and the individual didn't know what to do, didn't know how to fight back. And yeah, I mean, and eventually the court reversed the eviction, but shouldn't have happened to begin with.
The rent is too damn high.
Yeah, the rent is too damn high, and pointed out that it happened in the middle of winter. Didn't have a car, didn't have a cell phone, no nothing. I mean, come on. And I get the fact that you are going to have situations in which maybe a tenant's behavior is egregious, it's endangering other people on the property, and I've got no problem with getting people out in those under those circumstances. But again, public housing, these people have really no money, and we've got this aggressive, we have in some areas aggressive eviction attempts being made. And again, what does it say about us as a country?
Right. It's well, what it says about us is that we're the richest country in the world, and we're okay with absolute poverty, land and property belonging to the top 1%, and the ability to own a home is nothing more, not just a dream, it's a fantasy at this point. And with millions of Americans struggling with medical debt, medical bankruptcy, and including student debt, and so much more, um, I have to again say that during the pandemic, all of this could have been avoided if there was a debt jubilee, if there was an opportunity for people to get pardon of their debts and not be worried if they'll be out on the streets, because that's the one thing, well, not one thing, but there's many things that our government has failed to do, and that is provide safety and security for its people.
Yeah.
And the thing is, no one seems to be in a rush to do so. Where's the squad at? Where's Bernie Sanders at? I mean, they're telling us to vote harder for corporate Democrats and Democrats to say things that we want to hear, words that we agree with, but they're not following through with it. They're not following through with a goddamn thing. They're saying, oh, it's too hard, or either that we have too many blue dog Democrats, or now is not the time, but we need you all to be patient. We'll get to it when we get to it. Just wait. But there are Americans out there that don't have time to wait.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and exactly. And so go ahead, Lane. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I wait. What you're saying, and again, a lot of this could have been stopped, if they had the debt jubilee, for example, for homeowners. We had an extraordinary couple of years here, and you had the landlords, who, again, many landlords only own a few units. They do not own massive tracts of land and housing. They have a few units, and if they'd done that for them, they would not have, in some cases, be facing foreclosure or utility problems. If there had been, okay, we're going to subsidize the rent of your unemployed tenants. I mean, there are ways of preventing that so that we wouldn't have people going to an eviction court at this point out of desperation. And I mean, we can talk a little bit about this going on in DC. There's been an increase in Washington, D.C. at this point because of all the moratoriums being eliminated. And you've got people who are, they're trying to get rental assistance, and they're required to get rental assistance so they can stay in their units. But the rental assistance program doesn't have enough employees to process the applications. Mm-hmm. And they're waiting for additional, and these people the clock is ticking on being evicted.
Right. And it's just getting worse. And again, we're seeing stories where, again, you have, without COVID era protections, evictions in the region are ticking up, and it's just getting worse here too. With this story that you shared, it's when does it stop?
There's one thing that's going on right now. It's actually a Denver in Denver. There's a ballot initiative, 305. And what would happen is there would be a tax levied on landlords, and it would be a $75 a year yearly tax. It would be tied to inflation, and the money would go into a legal fund that would allow tenants to hire a lawyer in eviction cases. Okay. I've been saying for a while. Look, I live in an independent home. Independent landlord, who's a great guy. I mean, it's the kind of housing that I need, the situation that I need. It works great for everybody. Fantastic human being. And I understand that the independent landlords have a difficult time of it, but there is the issue of, look, we understand the importance of providing people with a lawyer if they've been charged with a crime and are looking at being, in interactions with the criminal justice system, possibly losing their liberties and freedoms. I would say that housing is one of those areas of civil law where, I think legal representation is critical. because once you lose your home, your life is going to fall apart in ways that many people cannot imagine. And when you consider that a lot of people no longer work in offices, but they work from home these days, a person could almost immediately, in one fell swoop, lose their livelihood at the same time,
Right.
as well as potentially their children. I mean, it's a really serious move. So, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do think that something needs to be done to provide people in need who can document that they are in need with an attorney if they are facing eviction. That's just one area that I think we just cannot mess around with. And if it means a tax on the landlords or some way of doing it, so be it. I think it is far better for everybody if the tenants have legal representation.
Agreed. Now, this thing was Eviction Lab, though. What is this, though? For just so
Well,
our
I
viewing
put it
audience?
up for folks, and basically, these good folks have been tracking evictions around the country, and they're putting together that data. I put it on the newsletter, the show notes, which everybody can check out in the link below the video. Subscribe if you'd like, and then you'll get a notification every afternoon of when the show's going to happen. But I want people to be able to do their own research, and Eviction Lab is there for people to do that
Okay.
and to
Wow.
check eviction rates in various areas, get some information, get some pretty serious data about how this works. And it's just there because I want our audience to be able to check the information.
So here's Illinois eviction filing rate 2.9%. The minimum is 2.5, max is 3.4, and we have a population of 12.8. Oh my goodness. Wow. Hold on. So let's check out other states. My goodness, let's check out California. Where California, oops, I haven't
It's better than letting you nuke people, Kit, like you
yes.
did last time. Yes,
Hey,
that
hey,
was
hey,
that was stunning.
we don't talk about that, but compare it. Okay, so we got Illinois and California. Obviously, eviction filings per day. Oh, 364. Oh my goodness, compared to Illinois.
And look at the households that are threatened. I mean, that is a real. I mean, it puts down that
Holy
number.
cow.
Think about the impact on not just the economy, but on civil life in these areas when you have this many people who are living on the edge like that. Think about the psyche, what is people's psyche, but think about how it affects their work, how they relate to their neighbors, and what happens when you have tens of thousands of people who could, within the next few months, be evicted.
Wow.
So there's a lot of here for people to work with.
There is. And you can find all these links in the show notes in the description box below. Be sure to check them out. Obviously, it's not getting any better, folks. It's going to keep on getting worse. Hold on. There's a lot of big red zones. So hold on. Let's check out New York. Let's check out this one, Maryland and New York, or Pennsylvania and Maryland. View full comparison. Oh my goodness. The eviction rates for Maryland households threatened 238,000. Wow. Oh my goodness.
And look at that number for eviction filings per day.
Oh, it's only going to get worse, folks.